All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, July the 5th, 2023, and this is the Kubernetes SIG Cloud Provider meeting. SIG Cloud Provider is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidance, which essentially says, please treat each other as you would expect to be treated, which is to say, please be kind to each other. And also, please raise your hand if you'd like to talk, and I will call on you. So, I would ask everyone to add yourself to the attending list on the agenda here. Yeah, Bridget, go ahead.
For whatever reason, this meeting is being recorded is still on screen. It might be on a different screen for you, but it's like blocking the thing you're trying to share. If you can click the got it.
That is really weird. Let me see. Did it go away?
Oh, never mind. That was actually mine. It was just positioned perfectly to look like it was yours. Zoom. So exciting and challenging.
Awesome.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, so please add yourself to the attending if you'd like to on the agenda, and otherwise we'll get started by going through the sub projects, and I guess we'll come back to the scrub triage at the end. So I'll just go through these. Do we have anyone from Alibaba or Baidu, AWS?
Yes, I'm from AWS.
Yeah, do you have any updates for us, Kirthan?
No, we're still, I think previous meeting, like there's this discussion to add AWS, to have like 3 cloud providers for testing in the upstream path. And I'm planning to work on that.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And welcome, welcome to the group, Kirthan.
Sure. Thank you.
Bridget, you still had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to add, or Azure's next anyways?
Yeah, I tried to lower my hand. If it's still up, sorry about that. I don't know. I'm apparently having a lot of Zoom challenges today.
No worries.
But no, I don't have anything specific for provider Azure today. I put some agenda items about other topics, but I don't have anything for Azure today. It looks like we haven't had a release since last time we discussed it. So probably
Cool.
because of there was the various holidays.
Cool. GCP?
Yeah, just adding a note about the ongoing effort to try to get the Cloud Controller Manager running by default Kubernetes. Yeah. No other updates on that.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I don't think we have anyone here from Huawei Cloud, IBM Cloud. I think we've gone through every OpenStack, vSphere. Okay. All right, so we'll go down to the regular agenda meetings, the regular agenda items. The first item is carried over from the last meeting, and this was from Bridget about we need to fill out the annual report.
Yeah, I put it on here so we wouldn't forget it. I'll take that and clone it and put it in a Google Doc and link to it from this so that we can start working on it before we are ready to file the PR. This is because it looks like this is just the template that they generated for us.
Yeah.
So probably you and I should sync on that a little bit later and bring it to the next meeting.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you want to start a doc, I'll be happy to kind of give whatever input I can there. Okay. So the next topic is about the requirements to graduate disabled cloud providers and disabled kubelet crowd credential provider to beta. I don't know who added this one. I think we were talking about it last time. I have reached out to Dims and Antonio and Ben the Elder about coming to one of our meetings to talk about kind of some of the next steps that we need to do to be able to get that enhancement across the line. I don't think Antonio could make it this week, but I think he's going to come next week or in the next meeting to try and help us out. But we probably need to coordinate a little bit more and figure out like kind of what we want to ask and everything. I think right now we had just talked about having kind of a general conversation with them. Does anybody have like questions or comments about this topic?
Do you recall what was the biggest blocker for this? It was for the PR. Is it just like a matter of getting the templates updated and getting the CAP in good shape? Because it's a pretty old CAP, right?
I think there are docs requirements, like it got rejected because we weren't in compliance with the current CAP standards for docs for moving to beta.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. Was we need to describe for every component, you know, what the upgrade process needs to be, and I think there were a few other points that were called out there that we needed to fill out on the CAP.
Yeah, makes sense.
And to be clear, it's not in the CAP itself. It's the production readiness review components to progress the CAP to the next stage. I don't think the CAP itself had too many problems, except that it's missing the stuff that is now required. But I haven't looked at it further.
Yeah, I'm debating if it would be worthwhile to just, instead of trying to get the current CAP in shape, just like starting from scratch from the template and then backfilling information. Because I haven't looked at the CAP for a while, but I don't remember when that CAP was written, but template changed like quite a bit since then. Anyways, yeah, okay, we can chat about it more later. But
Andrew, do you want to start with that action item, or do you want Almiko and I to start with that, or like what's your thinking about? I mean, I'm not trying to be a blocker and volunteer for more stuff, but I have written CAPs and progress stuff in CAPs in the last like several releases, so I know that the process has changed a little. But yeah, I'm just wondering if you want to start with that or if you want us to start with that.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering. Yeah, I guess it'd be dependent on like what the blockers are. If it's just a matter of getting the CAP in good shape, then yeah, I guess like it'd be great if really anyone in the SIG who has the cycles can kind of take it. If there were like specific blockers or requirements that that's not only missing in the PR, but like some work has to happen to satisfy the PR, then it probably makes sense to do that first. But yeah, it sounds like we'll have more clarity with that when we have a chat with Dims and Antonio. I guess it wouldn't hurt to start with the CAP update anyways, because there's regardless of blockers, there's a bunch of stuff that we need to update.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if I would have time to do that, but I could certainly take a look at the template. Okay, so it sounds like we need like probably a little more information there, and then we'll need to redraft it, probably. Okay, so we talked about this a little last time, but Nick's role in the SIG. I don't know, Kirthan, maybe you have more insight on this, or what? I'm not sure what we have to say here.
I mean, he's on paternity leave like for last 1 month, so I couldn't talk to him and or mention him, I messaged him, but so I can check with him when he's back, which is mostly next month.
Yeah, I think this can wait till he's back. Like
yeah.
it's not But yeah, whenever he's back, let's just maybe have him come to whichever SIG meeting comes after when he's back, and then just discuss it then.
Yeah, he's until August first week he's out. Like.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. So next we got a question. We got a topic from Joel here. Gracefully releasing the leader election lease on shutdown. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, so I don't know how much people know about the leader election code in Cube, but there's this option called release on cancel. What release on cancel does is basically when the pod gets signal shut down, it releases the lease. Typically the default is pretty short, so if you don't bother with this, then you're only waiting 10 seconds or so. But we do expose the kind of knobs to go and configure those and make those longer. In OpenShift, we have some pretty long leader election leases because of some maths that David Eads did at some point. And it means that actually what we were seeing is in the worst case during an upgrade, you could end up with about 2 minutes of downtime based on these lease lengths. Now, for the CCM, the issue there is that you've got nodes going in and out of load balancers while this is down. We were looking at upgrades and stuff, and adding new nodes. So it would be better if we could do the release on cancel. So I wondered if anyone has done any research into it and worked out whether it may or may not be safe. And if that hasn't been done, does anyone object to us looking into that in 128 to see if that's something we can enable safely?
And to clarify, is this just regular leader election from the CCM, or is this using the migration?
Just the regular between multiple copies of the same CCM leader election thing. So yeah, the standard version. And it's just
Does Controller Manager use release on cancel?
Cloud Controller Manager is working towards that. They found some issues with certain controllers that weren't shutting down gracefully, so they haven't enabled it yet. Basically, you have to make sure that all of your controllers basically pass through a context and will shut down correctly when that context is cancelled to enable it. Obviously, we have a much smaller surface than KCM, but I believe, speaking to Marche, that that's pretty much ready to go in the next release or so for them.
Does that mean KCM has the same like one minute or so issue?
In OpenShift, we actually keep the KCM to the default, so it's much shorter because of this known issue. But I was asked to ask, could we do this for the CCMs? Because then we can leave it on the longer leases. One of the reasons for the longer leases is obviously if you've got lots of components in your cluster and they're all regularly updating, retrying leases every 3 seconds, it's quite a lot of load on the API server. So we're trying to mitigate that a little bit. So it's not a desperate need, but I think it would be something good for us to do.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, I'm guessing no one here has really looked into it. So maybe I should create an issue somewhere and we can start looking into it and gathering the data we need to make a decision.
That sounds like a good idea.
Where should that
Yeah.
Agree. I'm guessing make an issue on the cloud provider repo.
You could probably just use just do it in Kubernetes. The cloud provider repo was mainly use the backlog for a SIG.
Yep.
But yeah, I think we'll get more visibility in the main repo.
Cool.
But without looking into it more deeply, I think what probably makes sense is for us to do whatever KCM does. So if KCM is probably going to support release on cancel 128, I don't see why we wouldn't just lump the change in together with CCM as well.
Yeah, it's just you need to basically check that things are doing the shutdown correctly.
Yeah.
So
do you know if that's going to get feature gated, or is that?
My understanding for KCM is they're just going to flick the switch on it.
Okay.
I've seen other controllers expose this as a command line flag and let end users choose. when they're configuring it, but I think we don't expose it in the CCM libraries. And KCM, I don't believe does right now.
Okay, makes sense.
But okay. Cool. I actually have two more topics, which are related, but I added the last one after Walter, so I put it at the bottom. So as regular attendees know, I've been banging on about this Azure 3499 issue for a little while. So actually started seeing the same behaviors on AWS recently. So Alexander's joined us today, who has been working on a lot of improvements to how disruption is handled with load balancers and CCMs and the configuration that we make. One of the changes that he made is to do with reducing the number of times that a external traffic policy local service reconfigures the number of nodes that are attached to the load balancer. When that fix went in, it actually broke AWS. And so previously, nodes would be reconfigured when the node went ready or unready. And so that's fine. Node goes unready, AWS removes it from the load balancer. With the change that Alexander put in, now for an external traffic policy local service, that node set is only reconciled when the node is added or there's a special taint or a special label you can use to exclude it. And I think now something to do with provider IDs has just gone in as well, but that's by the by. The point is it's no longer based on whether it's ready or not. Now, one of the side effects of removing it when it's unready is that you remove it preemptively as it stops being able to serve traffic. And that means your health checks don't actually need to be that great. What we found with Azure earlier in the year, and now what we're finding with AWS, is that the health checks that are implemented don't give you the ability to check that the node is able to route to the cluster backend. Do I mean ETP local? I think I mean ETP cluster. Anyway, the point is, same problem that we've seen on Azure early in the year. I've kind of written up the details here. We're now seeing on AWS, and we saw disruption go from like under 10 seconds. I think we had our stats were looking at like 7 or 8 as our P95 to like 15 to 20 seconds reliably of disruption when we introduced the rebase onto the 127 branch. So I've proposed a fix for AWS, and basically what that is let's move over to using, if a user has done nothing for their health check, they have specified not the port, not the protocol, nor the path, move over to the same health checking that GCP does, which is to use the kubeproxy endpoint. And then if they have specified anything, retain the old behavior. So in theory, this shouldn't be a breaking change. With the testing that I then did on this, we were getting 0 seconds of disruption in our testing, 0 to 1 seconds on the 20 runs we did. So I think this actually improves on what we had prior to the changes that went in. And I believe this is related to another KEP that Alexander's been working on, 3836, which recommends this kind of path forward as well. So this is the PR for AWS, which I wanted to bring up. Kirthan, if there's anything you can do to help move that along, that would be appreciated. And I did also want to ask Bridget as well about there is a PR to do the same thing on Azure. Last I heard, there was some internal discussion about whether it would be a breaking change or not, and I haven't seen anything since.
Yeah, I did talk to Pengfei last week, and I'm trying to get an update surfaced over on this issue. It just isn't there yet. So I'm going to sync and make sure. That kind of is like time zones are what they are. And there was a very inconvenient US holiday that you may know something about us and some colonialism and, that got in the way of this week being at all useful in terms of cross-globe collaboration. But I will try to get that to be updated.
Yeah, so that's kind of.
Sorry, I wasn't fully following all that, but I'm trying to just wrap my head around the problem. So the problem is basically we made a change where we don't consider the node status when service controller basically evaluates the nodes for load balancer, and that causes problem only for traffic policy cluster, because we don't actually like check the health check, the node port health check basically. But isn't the problem that, or isn't the limitation here that kubeproxy doesn't serve that health check endpoint if you use external traffic policy cluster?
There are a couple of ways you can check this. For ETP local, there's one endpoint, and Alex, do chime in if I'm getting this wrong. There's one endpoint, but then if you are wanting to do a cluster, if you have kubeproxy running, right, and it is running on the node, it can route to any backend pod within the cluster. So all you need to do is check the node's ability to route that. So what do you need to check? You need to check if kubeproxy is running. So what the Google Cloud Provider does is checks just the normal health C endpoint of the kubeproxy. If that's running, then that can route the traffic to the backend correctly. Now, what we've seen is combination of that and the graceful node shutdown feature is that when you go to shut down the node, right, kubeproxy gets a signal to shut down. You configure a graceful graceful termination period on the pod. It will then start failing the health C check, but still is able to route that traffic to the back end. By failing the health C check, if your load balancer is looking at that, it gets time to do the graceful drain of the connections on that, right? Because it's still running for 30 seconds. It still has the ability to route that traffic, but it's saying it doesn't. After 10 or 15 seconds, it gets removed from the load balancer list, healthy list, stops getting new connections, and then you don't drop any connections. Whereas when you check the node port, right, the node port will always route down to the pod's health check. And it doesn't matter for an ETP cluster whether that's on the node you're on or a different node. And so that will always report healthy. It will never report bad unless all of the pods in that service are dead. And it'll only stop reporting a healthy when the node is gone, when it can no longer serve traffic, at which point you can't do the graceful drain.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. This also then leads on to the next one, which sorry to skip Walter's topic. Part of the changes that Alex has been making, which I've read through the caps, I agree with. He also did a great talk at KubeCon, which I'd recommend you watch if you want to understand this better. We no longer have this check on ready or not, right? And so one of the changes has gone in. The service controller will look at the set of nodes that exist within the cluster. And in an attempt to reduce the number of cloud provider calls, I believe, it now creates a cache of, these are the nodes I sent last time to the cloud provider. And if, according to its set of predicates, that list doesn't change, it doesn't go and tell the cloud provider to keep updating the list. So it is the one that is making the decision, should this node be in the cluster, load balancer, or should it not? The predicates for ETP local, and there's a new feature gate, which I believe is on by default now, called stable node predicates. It only looks at the taint, the label, the provider ID, and something else. It doesn't look at the readiness of the node. So on Azure and GCP, this is fine. It calculates a set of nodes, and whenever that changes, it sends it to update node load balancers hosts, and they just pass through that list. We found an issue with Azure. Bridget, did you want to chime in? Do you want me to finish?
Oh, I actually was, when you mentioned it being on by default, do you mean because any beta thing is on by default? Because that changed. And now things aren't on by default unless you explicitly make them on. Anyway, when you said on by default, I was like, oh, I don't know what stage this is at, but if it's beta, that's no longer the default to be on by default.
Okay, it's beta in any case. I don't know if it's on by default or whether the rules changed or not, but it's beta.
Yeah, just so we're, before we keep moving on, I want to make sure we don't have a misconception, because 2 or 3 releases ago now, the default for beta, when something goes to beta, it doesn't flip on magically, because I guess that
Well,
was too
but
disruptive.
I think that's only applies for if you're adding a runtime API that's beta. But I think feature gates are still, if it's like just a code change gated with a feature gate and you promote that to beta and on, I think that's still on by default.
We may need to explore that. Anyway, not to
Yeah.
interrupt, Joel, please continue. I just want to make sure we note that that is possibly not the way we think it is.
I've just checked the code. It is on by default.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
So it's on by default. Basically, the CCM no longer checks for readiness, and it will only send when it sees the nodes update. So basically when a node is added or removed. Now, if you look in the Azure code, unfortunately, the Azure code is doing its own checks again. Is this node ready? Is this node not? So it has this cache of, should I exclude this from the load balancer for various reasons, one of which is the node readiness. And basically what we're seeing is that when the CCM sees, oh, here's some new nodes, it goes, my node set is different. It calls update load balancer. Azure's cache says these nodes aren't ready, so don't add them to the load balancer. And then eventually those nodes turn ready, but the CCM doesn't see that change, right? Because it's not looking at the readiness. So it never says, go and update the load balancer. Azure's cache internally says, yep, these are ready to go, but it never updates. So we've been reliably reproducing this for like 3 days. I've been looking at this. Every time I create the cluster, I add the worker nodes and they just don't get added. There are a few ways you can trigger it. So if you do want them to be re-added, you can restart the KCM. You can add another node because that will trigger it to update the balance of the list, but the new node won't get added, only the old ones that are now ready. Or you can wait for the full resync, which I think takes 10 hours. So again, I've written up an issue. This is related to the previous one. I think if we can get those 2 PRs merged that fix the health checks, we can get rid of the node readiness checks in Azure. I think it needs a little bit of some re-architecture there. So I definitely want some input from the maintainers of the Azure one. But I wanted to bring it up here today, one, to put some visibility in, and also in case there's any other cloud providers who happen to be using the node readiness as some condition when adding their nodes to the load balancer. Basically, don't do that anymore. Rely on the hosts that the CCM gives you when it calls update load balancer and just apply that, and everything is jolly from that point. So yeah.
Thank you, Joel. And I will bring this back to my colleagues and try to get an update on this exciting new issue. And I'm not being sarcastic. I think that sounded sarcastic. I'm actually really excited about this. It's like, oh, so much detail. Thank you.
Yeah,
Just one other measure you could take to resolve the situation is maybe update the service that has the load balancer by adding an annotation or a label or whatever, just to trigger the resync of the service. And in that case, you could probably fix it. So.
Yeah, I think I've written some details on the issue. I've gone into as much detail as I can going through the code of where I see the issues. And the way that I was reliably reproducing it is to create a cluster and create a single ETP local service. And with that, it was reproducing reliably. But as I say, all the issues are in 4230. So yeah, hopefully we can come up with a fix. But I think the first thing to do is that for AWS and Azure, the pools that were mentioned in the last topic.
Joel, I think you're ahead of everyone here, because it's going to be like maybe a year or two before like a lot of managed services are going to be like rolling out 127. So you're probably catching this issue like ahead of the curve.
It's also on 126, and most cloud providers have already officially started supporting 126. I know Azure does, so, and the bug is, so just FYI.
4230, the one I was just mentioning, we have also reproduced in 126, but it's not present in 125.
What's the reason for not looking at the node readiness? Was it just causing too much churn?
No, there were other bugs as well with regards to that, where it could, for example, so if a node flaps when it comes to the readiness condition, so between not ready and ready. If the node is flapping, but the application or the pod running on that node is healthy, so essentially there isn't really a problem with the node, but for whatever reason, the node object is flapping state. Well, in that case, the node gets removed from the load balancer. And if it's ETP local, then ingress for that pod is essentially cut, right? So there's an ingress downtime there. So that was the original issue as to why this this fix was implemented in 1.26. So yeah.
And node readiness doesn't necessarily mean it can't route for an ETP cluster as well, right? Like just because the node says the disk is full doesn't mean kubeproxy can't, route traffic to the back end.
Yeah.
I think that one of the reasons it was added, is because of these health checks, and health checks are hard, right? But I think we're getting there with that. I think that's what's written up in 3836 or whatever the cat number was. I can't remember now. There are better ways that we can do this that mean that disruption is getting to zero. And I've been testing on AWS and Azure recently, and we've gone, OpenShift does a bunch of statistical analysis on the load balancer disruption when we do upgrades, right? That's what we care about. Our customers don't want their pods disrupted. And we've had some serious spikes from, GCP with a few bugs there. But AWS and Azure have consistently been, 4 to 10 seconds of downtime. With the changes that we're working on here, we're getting reliably zero downtime, which is just that's what we want, right? That's the goal. So yeah, I think the work that's been done here is good. We just need to get it in and make sure we don't break people, and I think kind of get the word out to get people using these new health checks and the graceful node shutdown stuff, so that we can get people with good disruption metrics.
Thank you so much for working on this, Joel. And I kind of wonder, when you mentioned we don't want to break people, one of the things that will probably all the managed services will need to do is make sure we have a path for people that is either well documented or backwards compatible. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Nobody wants to surprise their customers with, oops, your clusters are broken, lol. So
yeah,
even if the change is a good change, we can't make a surprising thing happen.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think so there's a few variables, right, in a cluster. So one of them is you may not have kubeproxy. I think kubeproxy is implemented for most CNIs, but I know, for example, OVN Kubernetes doesn't have kubeproxy, but they mimic the kubeproxy health check endpoint, so you can still do these style of health checks. So as long as people have got that and it's working, we can make this work. But you're right, we don't want to do anything in a backwards incompatible way. And I think that's why both the Azure and the AWS PRs that we put up make sure that if a user has any opinion at all about how their health check should look, we just keep the behavior as it was before. It's only if they have zero opinion that we just swap it underneath them. And hopefully they just go, oh, this looks better, I'm getting less disruption, great.
Yeah, it almost sounds like we're trying to do all this like sophisticated orchestration due to lack of proper health checks. So it makes me wonder, like, I think the change you're proposing, like, tactically makes sense based on the existing behavior that's out there and not trying to break people. But it also makes me wonder if there needs to be discussion with SIG Network on enhancements to not just kubeproxy, but like to the service spec, on whether we want like better health checking API. So like one thing I can think of, like, instead of using kubeproxy like kubeproxy tells the endpoint, kubeproxy can have like a dedicated port, and then it'll have like a path for the service namespace and name for the actual health check of that service. And like that the behavior of that endpoint can change based on whether it's a local or cluster-based traffic policy. But it sounds like even if we had that, then or if we had that assumption that all nodes had that health check, then we can also make a lot of simplifications to the service controller. And like it would be a lot safer to just completely ignore node readiness and actually probably a lot of other conditions, right?
And what you're saying is something that I and Tim Hawken have been discussing for a while now, since we started working on this. So SIGNet is the primary SIG, I would say, that has been involved in all of these discussions for about a year or now, but it's been mainly Tim. But yeah, it's known, so to speak, at least from the point of view of SIGNet, I'd say.
Just seems there's been like,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that the message from SIG networking doesn't seem to have made it SIG Cloud Provider in a way. I think that's why we're seeing these bugs coming through, right? The changes have gone into the core Cloud Provider library, and then we've had updates to the providers, and that's when we've then seen, oh, this doesn't work anymore.
We've been pinging people, at least pinging SIG Cloud Provider and such on both the KEPs and the PRs that have gone in implementing them. But yeah, there hasn't been a lot of traction, so to speak. And I guess maybe that's normal since we're not really joining meetings and maybe coordinating personally on things. So if you just get a ping on GitHub, it's easily overlooked. So
it's also the fact there's so many different cloud providers, right? Like how many different implementations need to be updated for this? But yeah, I think maybe if we bring more awareness into this group, we can keep better track of it and then make sure that the different implementations are getting the updates they need.
Wait, Alex, are you saying that there is an existing KEP for specifically like the health check change that we need?
Specifically for kubeproxy, yes. Let me find that for you right now.
Linked in one of the issues I made earlier, I think 3836.
3836, exactly. So let me post that here in the chat. Okay.
I'm also noticing we have a couple more topics, although I think we'll save Walter's for next time. Joe, did you want to get into your other topic here as well?
That one we kind of merged in with the previous one, so we've kind of been through both of my topics. I'm ready to stop talking.
Okay, and I was just going to see if I could. Was there a link in chat that I should click on here?
Yeah, I'll copy some links into the right places in the agenda.
So I guess this is the KEP we should be looking at, though, that talks about this behavior, basically. Was that the story around this KEP?
Yeah, so essentially there were two KEPs. This one deals with health checking, mainly from the point of view of kubeproxy and how it should handle graceful shutdowns of nodes. The other KEP, let me
3458. I've just posted a link.
You're much quicker than I am. There you go.
I knew what you were going to say.
That was the KEP that implemented or led to the change that we've been discussing concerning readiness for the node object. So the ready state of the node and why it was removed from the KCCM service controller. So.
Okay, great. That's awesome background. Yeah. Okay, so Joel, you feel you've had a good discussion here. I think the follow-up is to get some reviews on these two pulls that you had up, but also it sounds like there's kind of a bigger question as well that we just need to keep talking about here. Maybe like I guess I'm not. Is there an action item on the larger topic of like the general behavior?
No, kind of bringing it up for visibility, really. Like, this could be an issue in IBM. It could be an issue in other providers as well. I have no idea. I haven't looked too far afield. I've gone through AWS, GCP, Azure. If I bring it up here, hopefully it identifies it to the other maintainers. But I think it's something we need to be aware about. And yeah, obviously, like, giving Bridget some homework to go and find out some stuff on those for me, and then obviously the AWS one as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Always happy to have homework from Joel.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Amy.
for bringing such a well-researched and historied topic here. It's greatly appreciated.
And it also sounds like someone from the SIG should probably sign up as a reviewer or like representative for some of the caps that Alex is working on.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or what I could do is maybe try to join this meeting more often and share news with you guys as well. I usually join the Signet meeting as often as I can, so I'm a bit more involved. But I could start doing it here as well, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be great as well. I haven't been able to make Signet due to a recurring conflict for a while now.
I feel like when they moved Signet to make it a more convenient time, it became less convenient and more conflict having for me, which was unfortunate. But so I'm not at that one as much as I could be either. But yeah, Alex, also if you want to, for right there where we have now reviewer on the related cups, would you mind commenting or putting a link to the exact specific ones that we're talking about, just so that when we follow up, we have the exact links
In this Google document?
Yeah, I can copy it.
Or you could, if you can grab them, that's also fine. Thank you.
It's something I have an interest in, so I'm happy to follow it and try and bring stuff back if needs be.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to get the 0 second disruption.
Was this the other one? 3458?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. So the last topic we have here from Bridget about the upcoming KubeCons. Take it away, Bridget.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I know that it's July and these things seem like they're a million years away, but sadly they are not. And the deadlines are coming up to put our maintainer track topics in. And I did chat with our colleagues who are going to be at the KubeCon in Shanghai and got an outline of what Pengfei would be willing to give there because there hasn't been an in-person in China for some time, but there is going to be one this year, and maintainer track is available. And so we could, and my question basically is, how do people feel about a maintainer track in Shanghai on this topic? And then would anyone else be in Shanghai and want to participate? And then the related question, of course, is who plans on participating in the maintainer track in Chicago? Who plans on being there? It's you know, in the US, so maybe travel is easier for some folks, etc. So that's just kind of the overall question. It looks like El Miko is putting in real time that he thinks that's a good idea. Again, I had a nice talk with Pengfei that was basically, we need to, and I sent him the video for Michael and Joel and I in Amsterdam, and was like, a talk like this with some technical depth, with the topics that are, you know, of interest to you, and it can't be Azure specific, though of course you can use examples, but this is intended to be instructional for people who are watching videos or participating in live in KubeCon Shanghai. And he took it, ran with it, and kind of came up with a few topics there. So basically, yeah, that's, unless people object greatly, I think Almiko and I are the ones who would be proposing these. So mostly I just want to know if anyone else going to be in China who could participate in a talk. I don't know if anyone else plans on going to that one.
I mean,
So
yeah,
that's
I have no plans to go to that one, but I think it's awesome for us to have more representation there. I think, you know, yeah, getting some new colleagues involved, especially in Shanghai, I think it's tremendous.
Yeah, agreed.
Well,
I mean, I
okay,
would go
good.
if I could get the travel approved, but probably not. So we should do it.
Well,
Yeah.
well, how about getting travel to Chicago, Andrew? Can we get you in the maintainer track there?
That's the hope, but I don't know yet. So usually, yeah, like travel policy right now is like kind of in flux. So with KubeCon Europe, it was kind of prioritized for folks that are actually like local to Europe.
Of course.
So I'm more hopeful about this KubeCon, but I haven't heard any details, so I don't know.
Okay, I know what we did last time was, I think Andrew and Nick put in the maintainer track proposal, and then we ended up swapping out the speakers based on who could be there, and they were generally okay with that.
Mhm.
Do we want Elmiko and I to put in at least a placeholder for Chicago with people we think will be there, and then maybe I would love to have people who haven't given the maintainer track update give it, if possible, or at least not lately. And this is not me saying Elmiko and I can't be up there constantly. We certainly can, but it would be super if, say, Andrew could be up there. Yeah, for example. Joel, you gonna come to KubeCon North America, or is that probably not?
Travel budget is not looking good. I will certainly ask, but
Magic 8 Ball says.
yeah, getting a free ticket to KubeCon would help the point, but it's the flights and hotel at the moment. We're very strict on that.
Yeah. Okay, well, we can see who is going to be possible to put on it, but it would be super if we had, Andrew, etc. All right. Basically, I want to talk about that, and then I will sync with Elmiko separately and get the proposal hammered out and turned in for Pengfei, because I think having us give a SIG Cloud Provider update in China would be really superb.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, feel free to hit me up if you want any help or anything.
Yeah, I have an outline. I just need to kind of, you know how it is, make it a little bit more
Yeah.
succinct.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool.
That's all I have.
That brings us to the end of the agenda. Anything else people want to talk about?
Is Walter the main person? We'll definitely move that topic about the cloud provider test accounts, but what he wrote about Azure sticking out, I just was like looking at that, trying to look for more information. So I know that there was a whole thing about the infrastructure that was donated and all this stuff, and it's like that might be details, but in case Walter watches this or reads anything later, I want to make sure we actually look into that.
Yeah, I don't have any further information on that. I'm guessing that he was calling it out because like vSphere can be run on top of something else.
Absolutely.
And the GCE costs, I don't know how those get calculated, but
All right.
He's probably just basing it off of like which jobs are failing the most. But yeah, I'll give him a ping.
Okay.
I'll give him a ping internally, see if
Maybe just
if it's urgent.
see if he wants to either come to the next one or sync with us between meetings, just to make sure we follow up on this, because it sounds important.
Who needs tests?
Help.
Okay, well, with that, thanks everyone for coming out. And I will work on getting the video uploaded and hopefully it'll be up soon. So yeah, have a good one. Till next time.
Good one. Bye-bye.